silent trait that makes you impossible to manipulate. It begins with a shape you know by touch, a need that looks innocent, a silence you rush to fill. Someone offers a small kindness, a sharpened compliment, a confession strategically unsheathed, and something in you tilts forward. You don't call it hunger, you call it connection, timing, fate, respect, fairness, closure. You call it anything to avoid admitting the engine under the floorboards, the restless insistence in you that wants to be seen, believed, chosen, absolved. That insistence writes checks in your name, and someone else brings the pen. They never start with force. They start with mirrors. They hold one up and say, "Look, this is who you are in my eyes." You see a better angle of yourself, or a worse one, and you lean toward it as if it were oxygen. You start negotiating with an image. If I say this right, I'll be understood. And all the while, your breath hitches on an invisible hook, the compulsion to correct the story. Manipulation doesn't need chains when the prisoner builds the cell out of explanations. Notice what happens in your body when someone implies a debt you didn't agree to, or paints your refusal as cruelty, or dilutes your boundaries with a smile. The chest tightens. The mouth drafts paragraphs. The mind starts arranging exhibits like a nervous lawyer. Most people step into the courtroom without a judge. They don't notice that the gavel belongs to whoever controls their need for approval. So they speak to the wrong authority. They defend themselves to the accusation, instead of stepping back and asking the only question that ever mattered. Why am I tempted to earn a verdict from a stranger? There is a kind of person who does not rush. The bait swims past, and the surface remains unbroken. They are not cold. They are owned by something quieter. Praise does not speed them up. Scorn does not detour them into long explanations. They do not bleed when a frame tries to make them smaller. They allow the indictment to hang in the air like weather and do not move until their feet are again under their spine. On the surface, this looks like arrogance. Beneath it, there is a silence that cannot be rented. Every manipulation is a wager on your reaction time. If I press here, their reflex will spend itself explaining, apologizing, proving, rescuing me, rescuing themselves from how I make them feel. If I let a pause stretch, they will soften it for me. If I imply that love equals compliance, they will buy my definition before they notice they've lost themselves. The ones who resist are not the loud, they are the ones who can watch the wave of their own discomfort approach, crest, and break without moving their feet. The pressure finds no opening. It slides off the shore. Social life trains us well. We learn to smooth the moment, to keep the peace, to protect a fictional harmony so no one has to feel the weight of misalignment. Harmony is a pleasant word for a crowded stage where everyone is mouthing each other's lines. Not moving in that choreography is treated as violence, but there is a difference between cruelty and refusal. Cruelty needs a victim to feel tall. Refusal does not need anyone to be anything. The most dangerous games wear soft faces. The mentor who packages control as guidance. The friend who translates you to yourself until yourself belongs to them. The lover who keeps score in a ledger you never agreed to. The cause that loves you as long as you forget the parts it can't use. They don't have to be villains to be effective. Most of them believe their own scripts. They think they are helping, aligning, calibrating, correcting, loving. That is what makes the pull so treacherous. There is truth in it. You can't fight truth head-on. You can only refuse the transaction, your core, for their comfort. The root is older than tactics. It's the first time you learned that being good kept you safe. The first time silence felt like punishment and talking your way back earned you release. The first time being misunderstood was unbearable because it threatened the only currency you knew, belonging. Manipulation does not need a manipulator when this circuit stays on. You will offer yourself up to anyone who offers you closure. You will chase any verdict that promises to untangle your reputation from the knot in your stomach. You will call it justice. You will call it communication. And the barbed wire under the paint will cut you every time. There is a trait so quiet that most people dismiss it as temperament, or mistake it for coldness, or reframe it as antisocial pride. They don't see it because it does not perform for strangers. It is not clever, not theatrical. It does not raise its hand in the seminar of life. It sits at the back and owns its own chair. It waits for the bait to rot. It watches the stage directions float by and asks nothing from them. It lets others misunderstand and chooses not to follow the misunderstanding into its labyrinth. You've met someone like this. You left the conversation feeling equal parts exposed and relieved, like you'd almost been lured into a negotiation that never took place. You brought your resume of virtues, and they never opened it. You cast hints of guilt like fishing line, and they did not bite. You asked a leading question, and they answered the honest one instead. You waited for the sigh, the apology, the anxious elaboration, the explanation that would hand you the lever. Nothing arrived. The game sat empty on the table between you, and you understood too late. This person cannot be moved by the usual ropes, because they have already made peace with the cost that keeps everyone else leashed. Call the trait what you want. To the naive, it looks like indifference. To the desperate, it looks like an insult. To the manipulator, it looks like a dead radio, no feedback, no signal to triangulate. But in the person who carries it, it feels like a room without mirrors. The voices outside still speak. They simply do not echo. The silence in here does not demand applause, and without that hunger, there is nothing to bargain with. You may not like this gravity. It confronts the part of you that wants people to meet you halfway, to recognize your effort, to sign the peace treaty you drafted in your head. It's not that those desires are wrong, they are simply predictable, and every predictable hunger teaches someone else where to press. People who cannot be manipulated are not saints. They are not above the social fabric. They have just stopped outsourcing the final word on themselves to the weather. The curtain lifts slowly. You see how much of what you call persuasion is just an economy of hunger and relief. The coin is attention, approval, permission, absolution, certainty. Manipulation is the counterfeit market where those coins are exchanged for obedience. Your body wants to stop the discomfort fast. Fast is expensive. Not the argument that sits inside it, but the coordinate system that makes certain moves feel required. If you were a decent person, you would, any reasonable adult knows, you owe me because. Real love means, this is urgent. A frame is a map that paints your refusal as absurd before you even consider it. You fight at the level of content. You've already accepted the world in which you must justify yourself. If your self-worth sits on that table, you will talk until you are empty. Think of the common tactics: fear, guilt, pity, prestige, scarcity, belonging. They all rhyme at the core. Each one builds a story where your need is their leverage. Fear says, you cannot survive without me. Guilt says, you cannot be good unless you do this. Pity says, you cannot bear the image of yourself that will exist if you don't save me. Prestige says, you cannot escape insignificance unless you attach yourself to my glow. Scarcity says, you cannot get this anywhere else. Belonging says, you cannot afford to be without us. The one who cannot be manipulated does not argue with these claims. They treat them as weather reports, perhaps accurate, perhaps not, but not binding. There is a posture, almost invisible, which unhooks the levers without announcing itself. It does not perform not caring. It cares deeply, selectively. It does not grant veto power to the loudest emotion in the room. It keeps a private court where verdicts are reached by listening, not by voting. This court is not romantic. It is brutal in the way that clarity is brutal. To say yes to this version of yourself, you must say no to 8 others. Manipulators hate that court because they cannot enter it. They can submit motions. Look at reciprocity, the most elegant trap of all. I know you didn't ask, but now you're decent if you match it. Politeness turns into a leash. The unmanipulable person is not rude. They do not repay in the currency demanded of them. They are not buying entry into a ledger they did not sign. They can hold the discomfort of being called ungrateful without making a purchase to correct the rumor. And the rumor, deprived of oxygen, dies the natural death of attention economies, ignored until it drowns in its own performance. Guilt is a fog that convinces you that paying it off will clear the sky. It doesn't. It breeds. It is a tax you pay for maintaining an image. If your goodness is public property, anyone can invoice you. The silent trait refuses the invoice because it changed the accounting rules. It doesn't deny the existence of wrong. It refuses the theater where dissatisfaction equals guilt equals obedience. This isn't freedom from conscience. It's fidelity to conscience over audience. It is the weight of living with yourself, which is heavier than any stranger's disappointment once you learn to carry it. Then there's urgency, a favorite of the incompetent and the predatory. We must decide now. If you delay, you are selfish, cowardly, complicit. The ability to wait ruins this tactic. Waiting is not passive. It is a decision to let adrenaline subside, so perception can return. Predators rely on your panic purchasing a story. When you insist on seeing without the spike, the story looks like what it is, a sales pitch for an unexamined life. If loss is the price of moving slower, the unmanipulable person pays it up front. Look at praise. It feels benign, but it can be more corrosive than attack when you haven't learned to breathe without it. Praise that anchors to your compliance rewires your nervous system to anticipate treats. You become predictable in the most dangerous way. You will choose your next move based on which one produces the loudest clapping. The silent trait accepts praise the way a mountain accepts sunlight. It does not bow to it, and it does not strap mirrors to its face to catch more of it. The light moves. The mountain remains. Notice the puppet strings you attach to being understood. It seems righteous to chase it. Who wants to be misread by people they love? But search that desire carefully. How much of it is a need to control, not just what is true, but what is believed? The unmanipulable person lets belief fall where it may, because they have already done the only convincing that is binding, convincing themselves. Others may call that selfish. Perhaps it is also the only way to avoid becoming a hostage to collective interpretation. Willing to be the villain is a phrase that makes decent people flinch because they hear it as a license to harm. It is not. It is a refusal to trade your spine for a clean record in someone else's book. If your goodness can be revoked by a stranger's fear, then it was never yours. If your choices are shaped primarily by predicted applause or backlash, you are not making choices. You are anticipating whether. The unseducible posture is simple. alignment over image, costs included. That means walking away not only from bad deals but from perfect-looking ones that require you to evacuate yourself. There is an architecture to this. Imagine your attention as a citadel with gates that open and close according to ritual. Who gets in? Who gets to sit in the inner chamber? Whose voice counts as counsel? Whose voice counts as theater? Most people leave the gates open because it feels inclusive, humane, loving. Manipulators don't kick doors. The trait we are talking about is less a hard wall and more a quiet guard who does not confuse volume with authority. He lets everyone speak, notes who is trying to move the furniture, and lets the interior remain unmoved. Self-deception is the doorway most often left unlocked. I'm being generous, you insist, while hoarding a secret ledger of all they owe you in return. This is where manipulation becomes a mirror. The trait that blocks it is not just resistance to others. If you cannot manipulate yourself with flattery or guilt, anyone trying to do it from the outside will feel like a child pushing a car. The paradox is sharp. To be immune to manipulation, you must be the easiest person to disappoint. Not because you offend everyone, but because disappointment no longer ends you. You have already survived being misunderstood in private. You have practiced choosing what costs you social calories and sleeping anyway. Without this, you will sell yourself cheaply to avoid the momentary drop in temperature. With it, the room can go cold and you can breathe in your own heat. Strategists talk about ratio of need. He who needs less has leverage. In Flesh and Blood, this is not a game you play to win points. It is a reorientation of appetite. The unmanipulable person still needs. They just need the right thing: integrity over comfort, reality over flattery, peace over performance, and they are willing to pay with the currencies manipulators hate: time, silence, misinterpretation, loss. Once you prefer these coins to panic and appeasement, every common tactic becomes expensive for the other side. There is no grandstanding in this trait. It doesn't publish manifestos. Most of its work is in the pauses you don't fill, the texts you don't send, the explanations you don't craft at midnight to earn back a picture of yourself you never should have outsourced. It is not passive-aggressive. It is passive to aggression. That's different. Passive aggression hides a move in a smile. Passive to aggression watches the move, names it privately, and refuses to play. This is not asceticism for its own sake. It is not joyless. It frees joy from the chokehold of permission. You laugh when you want, not when it is strategic. You give when giving is itself the reward, not a down payment on future leverage. You apologize where you were wrong without buying a lifetime contract to be controlled by the memory of it. You can be generous and still belong to yourself. The ones who don't understand will accuse you of selfishness. The ones who benefit from manipulation will accuse you of cruelty. The ones who have learned the same silence will nod and not explain. There are subplots in every interaction: the overt topic and the invisible bid. The overt topic is the movie. The invisible bid is the script doctor telling you how to react on cue. The trait we're circling around edits the bid, not the movie. It lets scenes play out. It rearranges nothing on the surface. It simply refuses the instruction: feel this at this volume in this order because I need you to. Without that instruction enacted, the plot can still happen, but it cannot own you. And most manipulators are not patient enough to work without emotional choreography. They leave the theater when the audience won't clap on command. Here is the quiet blade. The trait that makes you impossible to manipulate is not a performance you can adopt. It's an absence of need for borrowed mirrors, an absence of the compulsion to rush the discomfort, an absence of debt to the market of image. If you want a name that fits in a human mouth, call it self-possession, not the theatrical kind, the literal kind. You possess yourself, your story, your pace, your verdicts, your grief, your guilt, your praise, your hunger kept under your jurisdiction. This is not loud. It does not wave flags. It sits. It endures. It refuses the rental agreement when someone offers to manage yourself for a fee. Self-possession is expensive, not in money, in solitude. Being the villain in someone else's memoir because you would not act out their fear. Being called cold because you did not take the bait that would have kept a relationship warm for another month at the cost of your spine. You pay in advance by feeling those losses fully, without the analgesic of performance. Afterwards, when the moment comes, there is nothing left to threaten. The price is no longer a price. It's a memory. The uncomfortable truth beneath the practical one. Most manipulation works because you are already manipulating yourself. You tell yourself that being good grants immunity from being rejected, so you perform goodness as insurance and rage when the policy fails. You tell yourself that explaining will fix misunderstanding, so you explain past the point where your words are alive, and then call it communication while your stomach knots because you know you've just sold your peace to buy a temporary illusion of control. You tell yourself that love is a contract where both parties maintain each other's image in exchange for safety. The silent trait is what remains when those stories die. It is not glamorous to watch. It looks like mourning. And after the mourning, it looks like stillness. There is a threshold where approval becomes background noise. It is not that you disdain it, it's that you no longer hallucinate it as oxygen. This shift is visible only in the moments that cannot be rehearsed. Someone accuses you of motives you do not hold, not to understand but to pin you. You feel the old reflex light up. The mouth warms with counter-argument. The hands reach for the book of proofs. And then something else moves, a heavier, older gravity that has been fed in the dark. It recognizes the trap, to argue inside a frame that makes your existence a defense. You step out. You pay the price. The world stays large. Manipulators are not always villains. They are often unskilled negotiators of their own fear. They build scaffolds around themselves made out of other people's compliance because their body does not know how to stand alone in a storm. If you do not know that in your bones, you will hate them or forgive them too easily and fall into their architecture. Self-possession lets you see it without contempt. You can refuse without fanfare because you don't need the moral high ground to anchor your no anchors itself. Power has a taste, not the power to dominate, but the power to refuse to be dominated by your own reflexes. It tastes like empty space where there used to be panic. It tastes like choosing not to reclaim your image when someone distorts it. It tastes like allowing silence to exist without compensating for it. It tastes like walking away while a story about you grows teeth behind your backhand, not turning around to file them down. If you have not acquired that taste, you will chase sweeter flavors and wake up indebted. If you have, you will miss nothing when you decline the dessert. There is a darker plank under this floor. The world will punish you for self-possession, not always with violence, more often with distance. People who relied on your reflex to smooth their discomfort will call it betrayal when you stop. People who admired your generosity will feel insulted when they realize it's no longer for sale. People whose authority depended on your eyes, searching theirs for the verdict, will find you rude when you stop searching. This reorganization will be framed as ego. Let it. The alternative is to remain in a stage play where your body pays for everyone else's applause. Sometimes, manipulation arrives disguised as intimacy. I know you, they say. I know your wound. I know your fear. I alone can give you the antidote if you'll sign your trust over to me. The first time you hear your deepest narrative reflected back with accuracy, it's disarming. The second time, it's intoxicating. The third time, it's a leash, and you can feel it tightening around the part of you that still wants to be rescued. Self-possession is not the refusal of rescue. If there is a way out, it is built with your hands. If there is a witness, good. If not, you still walk. What gives this trait its final edge is not a trick, but an ethic. You would rather be free than be righteous in another's narrative. You would rather be accurate than admired. You would rather pay the immediate price than accumulate quiet bitterness like scar tissue and pretend you're fine. That ethic cannot be faked. People will try. They will wear the mask of self-possession as theater, wielding silence as a weapon, withholding as manipulation in reverse. That is just another performance, another bid for control through inscrutability. Actual self-possession has no interest in producing fear. It is implacable, not punitive. It doesn't need you confused. It needs you irrelevant to its center of gravity. In the end, the thing you cannot be manipulated around is the thing you have already accepted losing. If you can be blackmailed with belonging, belonging will be offered at a price. If you can be blackmailed with being seen as good, goodness will be auctioned off to the highest bidder whose standards you cannot meet. If you can be blackmailed with access, access will be rationed until your soul is rented. If you can be blackmailed with certainty, someone will sell it to you in installments. Self-possession comes with a ledger of accepted losses. You look at it on quiet evenings and feel the ache. You do not renegotiate. There is a choice that sounds small and is everything. Will you allow the world to misunderstand you in order not to misunderstand yourself? The timid answer is no. It builds an infrastructure of explanations. It spends your life. You pay, you grieve, you learn the taste of your own oxygen. On the outside, little changes. You still go to work. You still love. You still apologize when you harm. But the quiet market where your worth could be bought at a discount closes for good. Closed signs don't make noise. They just stop the traffic. Some people will hear all this and think it's a blueprint for invulnerability. It isn't. You will still be touched by praise and pain. You will still want to be seen. You will still miss the warmth that comes from easy agreement. The difference is that you will not mortgage your skeleton to buy it. You will not tear out your own wiring to fit someone else's house. You will not sell your reflection to fund a rumor's comfort. The unsentimental part of you will watch the fear rise and fall and keep your hands in your pockets. And the fear, when it realizes you will not dance, will go find an easier partner. There is a final mirror I will hold and then set down. Imagine the person whose eyes you most want to soften, whose approval you crave unconsciously, whose disappointment you cannot bear. The ache, the panic, the urge to sprint toward them with the best evidence of your goodness. Now imagine not moving. It does not break. The room quiets. Their gaze passes over you like wind over rock. And in that private stillness, ask the only question that matters. What do I refuse to sell, even to buy back my name?